everybody. I'm Sarah Maston, and I am a solution architect focused on data and process architectures for the past 25 years. But I'm also a strategist working on the global Kyndryl partner team here at Microsoft. And I'm here today to talk about a journey, a learning journey, a story that if you're like me, you may have had a bit of a fixed mindset when it came to mainframes, people who have mainframes, the community of users that are doing kind of some interesting stuff with them in the present. But when I got here, I didn't know anything about mainframes when I met Kyndryl. And I started a project with the ZCloud team at Kyndryl to really understand and learn and use a growth mindset when you think about the mainframe and what we can do to create paths to value for folks that use them. Because if you really think about this in a maybe you think about moving off of mainframes or retiring them or migrating workloads, which is how I learned about it. But the reality is, if everyone's been moving off of mainframes for decades, then they're still here. And you're about to meet a really exciting partner named Kyndryl. And Kyndryl has a cloud of mainframes. And I didn't know that 6 months ago. And a year ago, when we announced our exciting partnership with Kyndryl and how we would work together to co-innovate and make new paths for our customers and what we could do together, this became a really interesting topic to really learn and get into what is it that's going on in that ZCloud. How do we learn about how people use them? And is there anything we're missing? So Kyndryl, just to set the stage, if you haven't heard of them or don't know them yet, or even if you do, you might not know that they're 90,000 strong. The Kyndryls, as they're known, are 90,000 people in a new startup. Can you imagine how exciting? And in the Kyndryl startup, they're managing the biggest footprints in the world, the biggest estates for VMware, the biggest estates for SAP, and the biggest estate for mainframes on the planet. And so what an opportunity to co-innovate. Co-innovate? Is that even a word? I'm making it a word today. Not sure if it's a word, but I'm going to introduce you to someone that I have had so much fun getting to know and our teams have been working with. And it's Richard Baird, who is the CTO of the ZCloud at Kyndryl. Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah, and it's good to be here today. And it certainly has been a fun journey the last year. You know, I've been working in the mainframe space for many years, across a number of different product areas. But interestingly, when I was last in Microsoft many years ago, we used to send code backwards and forwards between building 1 and building 2 in a remote-controlled Tonka toy truck. Obviously, things have moved on a little bit since then, but yeah, that was how it was done back in the day.
Can I just ask you, are you using GitHub in the present, or are we still doing remote control cars? Just to be clear.
No more remote controlled cars. It is all GitHub and GitHub with the extensions for the mainframe. So things have certainly progressed over the last few years.
Awesome. Just so you know, also building 2, we kind of took that one down for our new campus. So
you didn't find my old coffee cup then?
We might have. Unclear. But can you talk a little about what you do at Kyndryl, and especially what I've been talking about, and people might not know what the ZCloud is or ZCloud, depending on where you live. And so, because it's really something I found really interesting when I was introduced to Kyndryl and you and your team, and I went, wait, what? So can you talk a little bit about what is the ZCloud?
So, in my role as CTO in Kyndryl for anything to do with mainframes, I worry about what customers may do with them in a dedicated environment, or as you just indicated, the ZCloud environment. And ZCloud gives our customers the ability to host applications in a Kyndryl secure, multi-tenanted mainframe environment, hence the name ZCloud. And it gives them the flexibility to scale up or down while maintaining the security and resiliency required for their mission-critical mainframe workloads. It allows them to reduce or eliminate the costs associated with their own managed data centers and infrastructure, while also eliminating the capital requirements that they may have from CapEx to OpEx, and gives them a predictable consumption-based pricing and the ability to flexibly configure what they're running compared to what they may have today.
Interesting. And, you know, for the audience who's watching, I know some folks may be, you know, on the more technical side and some on the more business side. You know, one thing that you came up with as a first pattern, can you talk a little bit about how, you know, our collaboration opportunity showed up and what your first idea was of what we could do together?
So the first thing that we sat down and talked about when we first met was, you know, just where are our data centers for Azure or for ZCloud, and we got into a conversation that said, look, many customers, when trying to bring these two platforms together, struggle with the latency aspects. You know, they have to deal with the different network providers, you know, restraints or constraints that they may have in their own data centers. So we talked about, you know, how we could actually improve the latency between application and data access between an Azure environment and a mainframe environment. So we came up with this idea of taking a Azure Stack HCI environment and, if you like, sandwiching it alongside a mainframe in one of our ZCloud centers or in a customer dedicated data center, if that's the way they wanted to do it.
Awesome.
The result,
connecting the dots, so to speak.
Yeah, the result of doing it obviously is, you know, both boxes are sitting within a physical data center. You remove the latency and you're down to data center network latency speeds.
Wow. And when you start thinking about that, you know, this is a really interesting pattern in which to use Stack HCI and you know, Arc on top of it, managing it, where you're thinking about this in your mind. So we have, you know, we have a diagram here conceptually, but once that connection is made, not only does this open up sort of new ideas, which of course we're going to talk about today, but it also, you know, there are regions where you would obviously know more about this than I would, where having, you know, Azure Stack is bringing its own benefits in an edge, like sort of an intelligent edge situation where you can't move data up to a public cloud, et cetera. Can you speak a little more about that and maybe some of the industries that Kyndryl and your group specialize in, that's really important?
So, you know, in our particular space, the latency issue is sort of one of the big topics, but then equally they get into how they're going to access the applications and data, and so the connectivity between the different platforms. How are they going to get Azure-based applications to, you know, pull data from the mainframe or, you know, connect with existing applications, build new applications, whatever. And then equally, they're going to worry about how do I manage this environment. So you referenced Arc earlier. You know, are there ways in which we can tie together the control plane between Arc and the mainframe environment to make it easier for customers to manage? And this is applicable to any of the business sectors where, you know, you get to see mainframes play. You know, historically, it would be financial services sector. You know, most people out there have cards that they go to ATMs still to pull money out. You know, in many instances, those ATM transactions will ultimately end up running in a mainframe. logistics environment. So things like travel and transportation, a lot of the airlines still use mainframe. Airline reservation in many instances sit on a mainframe. So a lot of the world's core businesses end up running their businesses on a mainframe, with environments like Azure sitting around them to extend the business capability, provide new ways of working, whilst still chatting to the same back-end transactions and exploiting those transactions and data that have been there for many decades.
I would love to double click into, let's talk about integration as a use case in general. Like Stack HCI is bringing this ability to, connect our clouds, which for probably anyone watching is frankly a revolution in itself. Once you have these two clouds connected, you've got Stack HCI in the middle, and now you're going back and forth and you can do interesting things, and probably so many things that it would be hard to name off like all the patterns right now. So I won't. However, when we started talking, and this was a real aha moment for myself, coming into this as, someone with no mainframe experience and sitting in a room with your team and you saying, pretend I am a business who has mainframes. What are my problems? What are my opportunities? What am I trying to do? And what are my pains? And so as we went through that process, I noticed that you use the word modernization a little bit differently than what I use it as, with how I thought about modernization when I would attach, any sort of mainframe or migration around that word. So can we talk about that a little bit? How you and your community and the mainframe developers, et cetera, think of modernization in its different forms?
Sure. So modernization is a heavily overloaded term in this particular context. And mainframe customers tend to fall into one of three investment categories, if you like, as well as three technical categories. Firstly, in the financial space, you've got the investor who wants to continue to invest in the mainframe environment and applications. They exploit new technology, etc. They tend to be a little bit more on the bleeding edge in many instances. Then you have the maintainer, who is, I guess you would say, happy where they are. They're not quite sure about the future, so they're going to maintain their current investment levels and applications, but do nothing new. And then lastly, you have the customer who will divest and move applications and data away from the mainframe environment to somewhere like Azure. When it comes to the technical side, the customers, irrespective of their investment view, I just laid out, tend to fall into one or more of the following three categories, of very simply described by Kyndryl as on, with, and off. On says that they intend to modernize their existing mainframe applications and data, maybe using the Azure DevOps tools to help them do that. With says that the customer wants to integrate their applications and data between the mainframe and Azure, i.e. they treat the mainframe as a platform in a hybrid cloud world and leverage the power of Azure to help them get the most from their existing apps and data while potentially building new solutions on Azure. Lastly, you've got the off crowd, who are moving some or all of their applications and or data completely off the mainframe to Azure. The last group, when moving, are likely to follow solutions on Azure, which could be re-platform, i.e. keep the application code and just recompile for the Azure environment with a partner. Refactor, convert the application code to a newer programming language like Java or C# while moving to Azure. Or lastly, rewrite, which, as the name suggests, means a complete re-implementation of the application to a truly cloud-native solution. In all of these, invest, maintain, divest, or on, with, and off, Azure can play a significant role in the customer's plans, ranging from helping them transform the application development and deployment approach through to integrating apps and data using things like Azure Logic connectors and other Azure technologies. And finally, completely rehosting the applications and data the scope and opportunity for innovation and customer value in all of them.
So for those of you, who are more like me, who come in maybe building a lot of stuff on, sort of I don't want to say a modern cloud hyperscaler environment, not so much coding, in DB2. This idea around the three different personas or archetypes was kind of mind-blowing for me, because I only knew about divester, and I would kind of, and it seems very fixed in its thinking. If we look at ourselves and we truly, try to solve the business problem here, is how do we help the other two? And this is where, if we were in person, and maybe someday we will be again, I would turn to the audience, that would be you, and I would sotto voce say, this is my next aha moment, because the data architect in me really saw mainframes, even going into, I'm going to go learn all about this, wrap my arms and brain around it, and go see what we can do together. I really saw mainframes as another source of operational data, which was no different than pulling data from maybe a SaaS-based platform, and you're bringing it into a data estate, and you're modernizing a data estate. You're moving data sources up into one place, and that pattern hasn't changed for decades. I mean, anyone who's in the data space knows that, it's always source data, some sort of move the data, ETL processes, which stands for extract the data, transform the data, and load the data into some place where, when it's together, you can do things with it. And that pattern has evolved over time, as we know, and we have so many cool data tools and things we can do, and ML, and let's go build apps and do embedded BI and things. Like, that story, for many of us, is a well-known story. But when I started thinking about the ZCloud, and I started to, use a growth mindset, when I said, okay, let's divestors, that's fine. I know a lot about that path. Let's think about those other two together. And the question that I wound up asking with our team at Microsoft in the room with ZCloud's team was, Richard, how much data do you have under management in the ZCloud, give or take?
And we have somewhere between 5 and 6 exabytes of online and offline data that we look after. That's a non-trivial number.
It is. If you don't know what an exabyte is, an exabyte is super, super big. A gigabyte you can think of as the size of the Earth. And the Earth is hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times smaller than our sun. And an exabyte is the size of the sun. And so what Kyndryl and Richard and the team is saying is, they have, at least 6 suns that could just have so much opportunity to bring that data into a holistic view for a business, if we can get to it, which is not simple. But for Richard and the team and Kyndryl, it is not as difficult as it has been historically for those that are not as skilled and familiar with mainframes and the different data types that are down there. But before we kind of double click into that idea, we do need to talk about something that, a lot of people watching are probably very, very cognizant of, is the app gap. And for those of you that don't know what the app gap is, the app gap is a situation where our demand for apps and doing all sorts of cool things, and everything that has happened in the last 15 years has created so much demand for people who know how to code, that we just don't have enough developers. And the numbers are staggering. And, Richard coming in, thinking about, even the divester, like you said, replatforming and recompiling COBOL. People who know COBOL seem to be a smaller percentage of developers. I have never programmed in COBOL personally, than those who maybe are doing JavaScript or Python. So do you have, I mean, you've been, around in this space, in developer space for a long time. And so what are your thoughts about the app gap, and especially how does it pertain to, languages that you use in the Z Cloud?
So I have to confess to being an old COBOL programmer. I guess I've written more than my fair share over the years. But equally, I've written Java, Visual Basic, C Sharp, etc. Um, the app gap is it does exist, right? There is we all know, we all read in the press about the shortage of skills around some of the older programming languages like COBOL. But it's not something that we should be scared about in terms of being able to exploit and extend any of the existing applications and data that may be out there. In Kyndryl, we've got over 8,000 trained mainframe folks who live and breathe anything to do with mainframes on a daily basis. We don't get scared by this stuff, and the opportunity to extend into, for business purposes, to be able to develop new applications in a low code or no code environment and extend them to be able to access and integrate with applications and data running on the mainframe is a huge opportunity that I think, Sarah, between your team and my team, we figured out this was probably an area we should go poke on.
And so now we arrive at kind of, what's going on. I learned a lot about mainframes. Richard and the team started learning about our stuff, the Microsoft Power Platform. There are so many rich tools within the Power Platform that we don't have time for me to double click into all of them. But this platform is really, really interesting, because if you look at this high level architecture, if you will, of what's going on, pay attention to the left. Traditional developers are, working in the stack, and they're making all sorts of cool stuff that you use. But as you move up, you've got everyone in a business is really going after that data-driven decision for whatever corner of the business that they're taking care of. And if you can get this data up to the main data estate platform, right? And then you can lay Power Platform on top, you open up a new world, especially working with yourself and the team, Richard, of, when you bring that data up, what can we do now? And going over to the right, now you're bringing those apps, those connectors, virtual agents, you may know those as bots. You're bringing those smart features and experiences for customers and for your own, folks in your business into Teams, which we have all started working in Teams, as we know, with what had happened in the past few years with the pandemic. We've just all started to collaborate in a way that is just centralized and awesome. And I really enjoy this. So this platform, on top of not just the data that you already have for your business, but now let's get that mainframe data up there, because I've read some reports, Richard, that there is a lot of enterprise data that is sitting in your cloud on the mainframes or on-prem. That this is really a partners making more possible story with the two of us to break it out and get it someplace.
This is a great example of where partners do make more possible between them when we sit down and talk about the business needs and how technology can be used to be applied to those business needs to address them. So it doesn't matter whether you're accessing the data, and as Sarah said earlier, it could be a ETL kind of approach, or it could be a real-time approach. or you could be using RESTful APIs or however you choose to do it, then in this low-code, no-code environment that we've now got between the mainframe and the Azure Power Platform, we can open up the applications and data, pull them easily, integrate them, and as we indicated earlier, with the Power Platform, you can now even start using Teams to integrate your applications with a mainframe application that may be 20, 30 years old. It's really easy to do.
It's one of these things. Personally, this you're seeing. We're sharing on the screen. This is part of a demo that if you are at Ignite, you can travel on over to the Kyndryl room and learn more about all the bits and pieces of how to make this connection work, this integration work. Teams and mainframes talking to each other, at least in my brain, was that it's just wow, okay, now here we go. Because once you can do this, I'm pretty sure we can do anything, with this data. I mean, it's just, Richard, my hat is off to you, the Kyndryl team, the ZCloud team, everyone that came together at Microsoft to really get together and think differently about how we can bring faster paths to value that we can add to that divestiture, archetype that we know. And so I think, this rich tapestry of options, and I'm still grokking the fact that you have over 8,000 developers that know COBOL and are getting into low code. I mean, I don't know. I'm super excited about this, and I wish we were in person. And everyone, if you any feedback, comments, like, please connect and reach out. What do you think, Richard?
No, I think I would agree, and equally the demonstration we've got here of collaboration between Kyndryl and Microsoft to co-invent, co-create together around these new opportunities is a great thing to see. I think businesses will actually see the value in what we've put together here, and with the app gap or the skills gap that we talked about earlier. Yes, there are people out there that do know both sides of the equation here, and they can come to the party. There is some real opportunity here for not only integration of existing applications and building out an extension to an existing application, but a great opportunity to actually build completely new business models here using the tools and the techniques that the teams have jointly put together here. And I would say thank you to you for hosting this session where we could actually go through it.
This is mind blowing as a data nerd, and how fast your team. These are data types that a lot of people in the present don't have a lot of experience with, but the folks on your team are just no problem. You want to move this sort of flat file data type that's 40 years old. Well, we can use this tool here, which does this, and now we've landed it in a traditional data warehousing story, and then someone can take that data and trend it or do some machine learning on it. What your team is capable of doing in this arena is just mind blowing. But it also makes complete sense. You are the most knowledgeable in this area, and so for those of you watching, and maybe you're gonna go get interested in COBOL, but you know what? Hey, you can use Power Platform. I just want to call out, Richard, your team and some of our folks. We're going to have a joint webinar coming up. So if people watching this who want to bring your data questions, your app modernization questions, your mainframey questions, November 1st.
November the 1st is the place to be if you want to ask any of those questions that Sarah just pointed out. The team will be there. The team is at the conference as well. So if you wander up to our little podium, you can ask some questions there as well. But we will be more than happy to try and answer any of them. And Sarah and I will do a great song and dance act if we can't.
And and I was going to say, are you bringing the remote control car?
It does have a special guest appearance fee, but if you want, yes, okay. I'll bring the remote control car.
Just checking. And for and so we look forward to meeting people. I'm sure maybe in the near future we'll be at other events and can talk. You can meet Richard, ask him weird Microsoft trivia, because obviously he seems to know some. Richard, thank you so much for being here today and going through some of these patterns with our guests and partnering to come up with these great, amazing solutions that we're only going to evolve as we go forward.
Sarah, thank you for the session that we've had today. It's been really good. I really do appreciate and thank you for the partnership between Kyndryl and Microsoft that has actually got us to this point. It's been a fun ride the last few months, and hopefully with what we've taken people through today, they can see the journey's only just beginning. So thank you very much.